Let's just get a situation report. And as you understand it, the fighting is going on right now in your country.
You are reporting it quite clearly. I understand that what you see, that's also what we see. And most of the cities you are reporting from, like Mariupol, they are totally under siege. Same with the second biggest city, Kharkiv, with 2 million plus people. And Kyiv is about to be circled by Russians. We are fighting. We need some support, which your correspondent and the president of Ukraine yesterday was, when he was talking to parliament, was making it quite clear what we need. We need to close the sky over us. We need support by military means. We also need financial support to survive this very, very difficult ordeal. And we want our people to be in safety. So these immigration waves, refugees, are now coming through our western border, mostly to the nations of Slovakia, Hungary, mostly Poland. More than 1 million people crossed just yesterday. So there's a huge operation is going on right now.
I mean, let's pick up on each of those points then. The closing of the skies, you'll know NATO says there is not going to be a no-fly zone. Are you thinking about some other way of trying to make the airspace safer for Ukrainians to continue fighting the Russians? Because, as you'll know, a lot of the firepower that's falling on Ukrainian cities come from artillery and multi-launch rocket systems. So perhaps fighting the Russians off in the sky will actually stop that.
That's absolutely the way we see it. All the tacticals means you are talking about, they can be covered if we have at least not superiority, but at least control over our skies. We are taking on different routes. One is what's just been described by having the jets we can operate, our pilots are familiar with, something which Soviet Union produced and we used to use them, and we have them now in our fleet. Poland, some other republics around Ukraine, they still have in possession. We can have a hold on them. Something else is the anti-air missiles we are talking about with our allies. We have our own, but it's not enough to withstand the pressure, not just planes, but helicopters and cruise missiles, which are bombarding our cities right away. We can also imagine the limited operation over these humanitarian crisis areas next to the nuclear stations, and where people are crossing, the millions of them are now very vulnerable against the attacks of Russians through the air.
If we could be specific on some of your answers there then, so you still want to try and see the Ukrainian Air Force get NATO-held ships, MiG-29s, for your fighters?
We can use MiGs, we can use Sukhois. We would be happy to use F-16s, and on top of our pilots are not trained to work with them. This is a difficulty we have to overcome somehow. So the best bet is the older Soviet Union types like MiGs and Sukhois. Something else is that we will need the support. We will need to retrain our people. It will take time.
And do you have enough time? Because you also mentioned...
No, we don't have enough time. You're very right. But if you have the anti-air missiles, for example, on top of our capabilities, this will allow us, to operate much. You don't have to have a pilot. You need an operator like, for example, these Bayraktars we're using, the drones. Something like drones, yeah.
And you said anti-aircraft. I mean, you've got sort of shoulder-launched missile systems. You've got your own ground-launched missile systems. Are you thinking about Patriots, the THAAD system? Like, what kind of system are you looking for?
The Patriot is in the very top of this food chain. It's at the very top of the line. We need something which will allow us, these manpads, they will cover up to 4 kilometers. But most of the heavy bombers are operating on much higher altitude. We'll have something bigger than that. And the particularities are discussed right now with your military as well.
Yes, there are discussions to try and increase the capability for surface-to-air missiles.
Absolutely.
And on that capability then, there is, of course, military assistance coming in all the time. How concerned are you that the resupply is going to become an issue soon?
We are happy with what is coming, and we see that led by UK and US and some other close allies, the rest of the world is coming to help. Some of the nations which we wouldn't expect to help, coming with the equipment we have to use from you and we get from the United States. Same system which we can use right now. Mostly anti-tank, which is extremely important. Hundreds and hundreds of tanks being poured on our soil, so we have to deal with those ones. But some manpads as well.
And you mentioned as well financial aid. What does that look like? There's lots of humanitarian financial aid going towards Ukraine. Are you talking about something else more specific?
Some things like, for example, we are now in the negotiations about generating capacities. Russians start cutting electricity, sewage, water in our cities, sieging them in a sort of middle-age ways. We have to get the generators to support the grid. And that's something we need right now. But even to get this huge industrial capacity generators in Ukraine is logistic operation by itself. In the middle of the war,
This
is becoming increasingly difficult to get there.
Yeah, Mr. Prystaiko, you were in Parliament yesterday as your president was speaking, a rousing round of applause. You know how unusual it is for them to clap in Parliament, but you guys do deserve that applause. I wonder if you've been able to speak to President Zelensky recently, and just can you tell us how he's holding up?
I did. I told him about the coverage. Unfortunately, for technical reasons, he could not stay and then listen to all the reactions in the parliament. So I had to explain to him that all the parties, not just the prime minister, but all the parties were united in support of Ukraine. So much of the media coverage, your people were staying in the greens next to parliament, covering the events. He knows about this, he feels it, and the whole Ukrainian people, they hear it, they understand that the support is here. So he is holding up, and it's widely because of support, of international support.
So he's aware and he's passing on to the Ukrainian people how the world is opening its hearts and is rooting for Ukraine to come through this.
We see it even by the hospitality which many nations are extending to our people who had to get in safety. Mostly women and children are living in Ukraine right now, millions of them, but men are staying back home and fight.
Do you think Britain is doing enough to bring in refugees?
We're going through, I will see the Parliamentarian Standing Committee on Homeland Affairs just in an hour. That's the ongoing discussion. The two of the layers of the immediate ones already done. We're now talking about the third sort of package for Ukrainians to be invited with no particular connection to families, with no family members on this soil.
So you're going to try and basically push for almost like an emergency visa, a visa waiver?
We're working on it. This sort of concerted effort with European Union, with UK. UK is a bit further for Ukrainians. They wanted to be closer to the roots, to the nation. They wanted to get back as soon as it's possible. So we are trying to understand how we do it without, severing this connections, severing these roots.
And Mr. Prystaiko, let's talk about trying to end this war. Of course, there are going to be the highest level talks, I believe, held tomorrow in Turkey between Mr. Kubela and Ms. Kuleba and Mr. Lavrov. How hopeful are you that those talks can achieve something?
We're not putting too much hopes on this particular one. We've been negotiating with them, and especially with Minister Lavrov for many, many years. I was doing this job before as foreign secretary, so I was doing my part of negotiation with Lavrov. And in most of the cases, he is just, the facade of the Putin's regime talking to the West.
A step, there's been these talks on the border. We're going to speak to someone who's part of that negotiation process in Belarus. But, the foreign ministers meeting, isn't that
We're not talking for nothing. We hope to get maximum out of it. And you're right, we are having this negotiation on the border, but it's mostly about the humanitarian corridors. Russians are not allowing to move any further. They wanted their conditions to be met, and they are unrealistic, unfair, and nobody's in Ukraine is eager to do. We would rather fight than go with the expectations of Russians right now.
I mean, because you've mentioned those conditions. Those conditions were put out just a couple of days ago. Is there anywhere in that the Ukrainians could accept to bring an end to this war? Obviously, the idea is that you become neutral, you never join the EU, never join NATO. I can see from your face that seems unthinkable, but it would perhaps end the war.
They also wanted us to recognize that they snatched the Crimea out of our hands. They also wanted to recognize the both of these runaway republics they recognized just 2 weeks ago, specifically to create even a higher ground for their own negotiations. And they wanted us to demilitarize, meaning to laying down weapons and moving from the borders 150 kilometers, our armed forces, leaving Kiev and Kharkiv exposed. This is so unrealistic that they do it on purpose. They're not expecting us to meet them. They're just creating this, informational sort of propaganda campaign.
You view it entirely cynically that this is not a sincere
Quite cynical,
attempt.
Absolutely.
OK, finally, let's just talk about the millions of people that have been displaced in your country. As you mentioned that people don't want to go too far away, they want to come back. But of course, the question at this point is, as we've seen this war on day 14 and cities being destroyed, what are they going to go back to after this war is over?
That's a great question. And being frank with you, we don't have many answers right now. What I can tell you that over the 8 years of war, already 1.8 million people were displaced. So we managed to absorb them in a peaceful, bigger Ukraine. And we are the biggest nation by size in the European continent. So there is enough place to start a new life there. But, what to do with 7 million people now trying to get to the western border is just serious threat to these people all over these times. They are the hours and days trying to get there. But then, what we do when we are already in a safe Poland, Hungary, or Slovak Republic, we are very thankful for this hospitality. But we have to understand how we can settle, how our people can earn their living, how can the settled kids go to schools, and all of this stuff the normal people already have covered. Now we face something crisis we never would expect to happen in Europe. You know, we've read about this and seen on TV in Africa, Asia somewhere, but never would expect it to have it in the 21st century in Europe.